College audition season can be a stressful time, not only for students, but for the parents and guardians who love and support those students. Take it from me, I am in the college application process with my own son right now, so I understand it even more than I did before. Today, we are going to talk about 3 mistakes that parents often make, all in an attempt to help, but that can actually make the whole process even harder. Hi, I'm Cynthia Cortman-Westphal, a Broadway music director, voice coach, and tenured professor in the musical theater department at the University of Michigan.
And I'm Chelsea Wilson, a performer turned voice teacher to Broadway stars and vocal coach on Broadway productions like The Phantom of the Opera, School of Rock, and more.
Here on the Broadway Vocal Coach podcast, you can expect real talk about the business, practical advice, and constant encouragement.
We believe there's space for every artist in this industry. All you need is the right support. So consider us your 2-woman hype team. Welcome to the Broadway Vocal Coach podcast, where we help musical theater performers get unstuck and take the next step in their careers. Cynthia, congratulations. You have a son who's going to college. Presumably, if you can make it through the application process, how do you feel?
Yeah. Well, we hit the first deadline, which is November 1st. November 1st is the deadline for a lot of schools for early action. And we did make it by about 8 p.m. on November 1st. So we made the deadline. So, now we're in a bit of that waiting game, or at least the first part of the waiting game. He's not in musical theater, so I didn't have that additional, pre-screen, all of that kind of stuff to do on top of everything. But I have to say, just going through the actual college application process without all of the pre-screen musical theater stuff on top of it was incredibly stressful. There was a lot involved.
And then you add in all of those musical theater elements and everything that has to be prepared, including additional essays and putting together a resume. And then, of course, the performance self-tapes and the pre-screens, like you're saying, it is so much. And it is no wonder that students and their parents, their guardians, their families, whoever is on their support team helping them get through this, sometimes feel like they're barely going to make it out of the senior year alive. Like, it is just so much to do. It is so much to do. And, I went through this process with my parents 16 years ago. Oh my gosh, more than half my lifetime ago. So I remember what it's like to not know really how to best go through this process. But you and I are now on the other side of this. You've been on the literal other side of the table for many years. And thankfully, I emerged from that process and went to school and all of that stuff. And we now have the opportunity to coach a lot of students and parents through this process. And there are several things that we see that we're going to quantify as mistakes that could easily be avoided that families are making as they go through this process. We really want to save you some heartbreak and some stress by talking about some of these mistakes that parents and families make as they go through the process with their kids. What do you think, Cynthia?
Let's do it. Let's get into it. Yep.
So, Cynthia, we've got 3 topics that we want to discuss today. What is point number 1?
Point number 1 is not having the money talk. This is a big one because I think there's a lot of adults who don't love talking about money in front of their kids. And in fact, their kids may not even know their financial situation. I think a lot of parents like their kids to feel comfortable and safe and well taken care of. And it feels really yucky to go to them and say, hey, listen, we cannot afford any college under the sun. We just can't. That doesn't feel great to do. But I think it's so crucial to have that talk with your kids about what is the reality of the financial situation and take that into account before you start to look at colleges and before you just let your student fall in love with all of these schools that may or may not be within the realm of possibility for you.
Yeah. And part of the money talk is, of course, what's in the family budget, but also what is the expectation of who's going to pay for what? When I went to school, my parents paid for some of my tuition. I had some scholarships and financial aid, and I took out some student loans. So I had really a mixture of every possible financial thing going in. And that was something my parents and I discussed. This is what's
Yep.
feasible for our family. If you go to this school or a school that costs this much, you will be coming out with some debt. That's something you're going to have to take on. Here's what we can contribute, blah, blah, blah. All of that's part of having the money talk. Because from, I think, the student's perspective or the kid's perspective, I don't remember having any sense of like, oh, yeah, student loans, sure, they'll be fine. Everyone takes them out, right? Well, now that's a really tough reality to deal with 4, 5, 10 years later. And being able to just at least have that in your periphery as an 18-year-old to help, kind of guide your decision making is huge. This is a tough one, but really getting specific about your financial situation is crucial.
Yeah, and there's a tricky thing about financial aid in that a lot of sort of middle class families land in this spot where you make a little too much to get a lot of financial help, but you don't really make enough to shell out $80,000 a year for a college program. Weirdly, it's often the families that are living fairly comfortably in a nice middle class setting that are the ones who can sometimes really struggle because they're not going to get enough financial support to really make expensive programs feasible. And yet there's just no way that an $80,000 program is going to be in the cards for them. And I've seen students over the years have parents who have taken out second mortgages on the home, who have maxed out credit cards, and still end up with tons of student loans on top of all that. And for some families, it's if that's what you commit to do, more power to you. But it is something to really think about of how much of a hardship do you want to put yourself through and what do you want to have left over at the end of these 4 years? How much debt are you willing to take on at the end of these 4 years? And I would go back to this idea we've talked about in other podcasts that there are so many great programs out there
Mm-hmm.
that if you find that your top 2 picks are just a little out of your reach financially, I guarantee you there are some other great programs that are within your reach financially that are also incredible programs. It's just going to take a little research to identify where those are and what they are, but they do exist. I promise they do exist.
Yeah. One more thing I want to add to this money talk point before we move on is also consider the costs that are going to go into applying, application fees,
Mhm.
travel costs, if you're traveling to schools or even traveling to unifieds, hotels, flights, all of that. Consider that and have that conversation with your kids. Am I going to pay for this, the parent, or is the student going to have a job, summer job, and save up money that goes specifically towards these expenses? The earlier you can have this talk, the better. I mean, seriously, freshman, sophomore year, junior year, so that you can be saving for those immediate expenses of your application year, but also having an awareness of what schools you're going to be targeting when you actually go to make your college audition list.
Yep. Oh, that's such a good point. Yes, because the audition process alone can be very expensive on top of the 4 years you're about to pay for. And just in case
Yes.
anybody
Yeah.
isn't clear on what unified auditions are a couple weekends throughout the year where lots of schools come together in one central location like Chicago or New York or LA, and you can do a lot of auditions all at once. So that is a great money saver if you are auditioning at a lot of schools. I highly recommend unified auditions because it's one trip. You can audition to multiple schools all at the same time. One weekend that you might have to take off work or one day they have to take off school as opposed to multiple. So definitely check out unified auditions as you go through this process because it can be a big money saver.
Excellent. Cynthia, what is mistake number 2?
Mistake number 2 is, this is a big one, going down the online forum rabbit hole. It's so
Oh,
tempting and it's so easy to get sucked down into all of that stuff. But we are here to tell
you can
you,
tumble so
you
far.
can tumble so far. Chelsea, I know that your mom did a little of that, right? I mean, I think all parents probably
Yeah.
do to some extent, Can you tell us a little bit about that
Yeah.
experience? Because it wasn't necessarily negative,
Correct.
but we can talk about how it can quickly become negative.
It can. It can quickly become negative and obsessive and comparative and
And oftentimes flat out wrong. Like you can often get just flat out wrong
yes,
information.
bad information. Yes, 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 yes. I think that's a huge point. Yeah. So again, back in the stone ages of 2007, my mom was on College Confidential, and she learned so much there. I mean, for one, when I was going through the college application process, I'd heard of these four great programs, and I was going to apply to just four schools, and they happened to be four of the most competitive in terms of just numbers, people applying for these limited spots, four of the most competitive programs in the country, because I didn't know any better. My mom didn't know any better. I was from a small town in southern Utah. We just didn't know. And so when my mom got on the College Confidential audition board, her eyes were opened. Her eyes were opened, and she realized, oh, wow, okay, let's add a couple more schools. And she handled it really well with me. Like, okay, I have all this information. I'm going to just help my daughter make some decisions that might be helpful without overwhelming her. So I do appreciate that. But yeah, you're totally right. I think now there's Facebook groups, and College Confidential is still a thing, and I don't know, Reddit threads. I mean, there's all sorts of places where these discussions are happening amongst parents. And I think the biggest problem here is what you said. It's misinformation. It's poor information, and then the feeling of competitiveness or comparisonitis that comes. Okay, well, this person's daughter has already heard back from X, Y, and Z schools. We haven't heard back yet. Well, they've already gotten their pre-screen rejection or acceptance, or they got into 12 schools and we've only gotten into one, blah, blah, blah. It's really tough when you are comparing yourself and your journey and your child's journey to hundreds of strangers on the internet. There's also a lot of parents who, again, I think with good intentions, have been through this process before and are considered kind of the experts on the process, and they dole out a lot of advice. And the advice is not always correct. The information is not always correct. In fact, I remember a couple questions we fielded from one of our BVC Aspire parents this past summer about like song choices. Well, we heard they needed 4 other songs for this particular audition. So we're thinking this and this and this, and I don't know if we can get this ready in time. And they were holding this piece of advice as like absolute truth, and thankfully we were able to step in as experts in this space and people who know what's actually being required to say, "Whoop, okay, calm down. You actually don't need
Yeah.
this. Here's where to focus your energy. Here's where to focus your efforts in this time, and just let that other noise go, because that's actually not correct information."
That's such a good example because in that case, I remember that happening this summer. We knew some of the folks who were the chairs of that particular audition. And so we were able to go to those actual people and say, hey, question for you. And we were able to just ask the question. And they said, no, that's completely wrong. No, they don't need any of that stuff. Here's what we need. So that was a great example of it looked like such factual information on that online forum. And when we went to the actual people running that audition, it was absolutely not correct. I hear lots of
Yeah.
things that, oh, University of Michigan likes this or this or this. And
Yes.
it's just never accurate. And I think I've talked to lots of colleagues around the country. Most of the stuff there is just not accurate because whatever parent is putting something on that forum is coming from their one student's experience, or maybe they've had multiple kids go through the process, but it's such a tiny sliver. So let's say some kid goes into an audition for a certain school and gets asked for a Disney song. That might have been the only Disney song that was asked out of 500 kids who auditioned. It might have been they asked for a Disney song because the pianist playing it happened to see that they had a Disney song in their book, and so they knew they could ask for it. All of a sudden now online, this school is going to ask for Disney songs. Everybody needs to have a Disney song. And it's like, no, 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 no. That was one very specific incident. So that's how these things can get perpetuated really quickly as fact when really they're all little individual anomalies.
And these kinds of opinions of like, oh, well, this school likes that or this school likes that is all what we call like game playing. And here at Broadway Vocal Coach, that is like so not what we're about. Like, you
Yeah.
cannot guess what people quote want. You truly cannot play that game. It is not worth your time. It
No.
is not worth your energy. It is not worth your anxiety over guessing how to be different for one school or one program or one director over another. That's just so not the way to go through this process. So if you allow those voices to be really loud in your brain, I guarantee you're inviting more anxiety into the
Yeah.
process. And this process is already difficult enough.
Anytime you hear anything that smells like, what does this school want? Or those faculty members like to see this, flip that question
Yeah.
around to what do you want to share about yourself? So rather than playing that game, like Chelsea said, about playing the game of, guessing what they want, instead flip it around and think about what is it about yourself that you want to share with them? Because that really is the only thing you can do.
Yeah. It's the only thing in your control. That's great advice. I think this is also where working with a coach who has a lot of experience in this space can be really helpful for students and parents, because again, you can kind of have that voice of reason who can step in and say, let me help you see this objectively. Let me share from my professional experience what to consider, where to place your energy, the importance, all of those kinds of things. So, just again, something to consider, that this might be one of those areas where place your trust in people who build you up and make you feel more confident in the process, instead of the opinions of others who perhaps maybe make you feel less than, like you're not doing the right things, like you get stuck in that comparison trap with other people.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Cynthia, mistake number 3, you've got some recent experience with it. I'm just going to go ahead and say what it is. Parents who end up micromanaging their kids throughout the audition process.
I don't know
Can you
what you're
speak
talking
on
about.
that?
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never micromanaged my child ever. What are you talking about?
Me either. My child's too, but no, I've never done that either.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, this year, I've worked in the academic world for years now and feel that I am somewhat of an expert in a lot of ways. And I have to say, this year has been particularly humbling for me because I had to go through it with my own kid. It's my oldest, so it's the first time we're going through it. And like I said, we aren't even doing the musical theater stuff. We're just doing, regular college applications.
Regular
And
college.
oh my gosh, here's what's funny. I was feeling so confident heading into that process. And I'm really lucky in that my son and I have a really great relationship. We don't butt heads very often. We talk about everything. It's a pretty even keel relationship. So I was thinking, we got this. We're just going to head right into college application season. No problem. We're going to get to that November 1st deadline. No problem. We're going to write these essays, all the things. And about a month ago, I realized there was no way this was going to happen without outside help. And I have to say, as someone who does college coaching, it was a little bit humbling to realize I actually need a coach. We need a coach. And it was kind of last minute. And thankfully, we found someone who was very upfront that she's like, I don't have much time. We are in crunch time now. I'm like, I realize, I know. But luckily, she had just enough time to kind of help us get over that finish line. And I don't say this to even try to sell the idea of hiring a coach. I really say it as a parent who I needed help. We really needed some help. And we needed help navigating a system we weren't quite familiar with, even with all of the knowledge that I already do have. And I think every parent to some extent needs to micromanage a little bit. We care about our kids so much. We want them to do their best. We want them to get things in on time. We just want the best for them. And in our efforts, my son a couple times was like, you are making me so anxious, Mom. Like, I was feeling okay about this, and you are now making me so anxious. And, when he said that, I thought, wow, that's in my effort to micromanage, that's the opposite. I'm trying to micromanage so that we stay on track, so that everything feels calm, so that he does his best work, gets it in on time. And instead, I was inadvertently just really stressing him out. So, if it's something that you are able to afford, because it does cost to invest in this way, but if it's something that your family can invest in, Oh my gosh, it was so worth it for us because my husband and I were able to then sort of take a step back. We knew that he was in such good hands with this coach. Everything this coach said to him, he quickly implemented. It all made perfect sense to him. Whereas when my husband and I would make suggestions, say about the multiple essays, oh my gosh, there's so many essays, Chelsea. All of
Mm.
these essays, whenever we would make comments or suggestions, it was often met with some resistance. And then he didn't want to do it. And, he didn't want to talk about it. So having that outside coach who was unbiased, not personal, there was no weight attached to what she was saying. It all felt a little more effortless from my son's point of view. It all felt a little easier from what he's telling me. So
Yeah.
that's a big one. That's a big one. And we've had parents from our own program say things like, we had one parent in particular say, this literally saved my relationship with my daughter because we would have been at each other's throats this whole time. And instead, I can just sort of be a cheerleader on the side while someone else gets in the nitty gritty on the resume and the essay and the wild card and the pre-screens and the dance and all of those things. So, whew. Humbling, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, I do really appreciate when we hear that from our Aspire parents and students that our relationship is intact at the end of this process.
Yeah.
I was able to film my daughter's pre-screens and we enjoyed it together. We
Yep.
got that note this year and I was like, wow, amazing. That's
a win.
incredible. Such a win. I think if there's any resources that you can utilize, of course, hiring a coach, going through a program like ours, BVC Aspire, or even just utilizing your college counselor at school or an English teacher who you could ask for some extra time to go over your essays or whatever the case may be, really utilizing the resources in your life so that you as the parent are not the only person harping on your kid to get these things done in the amount of time you think it should be done in. Really use your resources wisely here so that you can save your time and energy and the relationship some unnecessary stress.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's a great point. There are lots of places that you can find support. If you've got a favorite teacher, if you have a drama teacher, if you have a counselor at school, if there's someone at your church that you're close with, if there's even a family friend who is a good writer who can just help give some comments on those essays, reach out for a little support that isn't coming just from inside the family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. When the call is coming from inside the house, it's just a little scarier. Yeah, I think these are 3 excellent points, Cynthia. And I hope families and parents and guardians and anyone who's supporting a student going through this process can take these and just take a breath. Know that it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to stumble on these common mistakes that parents make. You can actually choose to do something different and better for your own mental health and your own time and resources as you go through this process, because it's not only taxing on the kid, it's a whole team effort. So we want you to be successful in this process. And if you want to learn more about what we do here at Broadway Vocal Coach and our Aspire program for rising high school seniors going into the college musical theater audition process, you can find out all the information about our program at bwayvocalcoach.com/aspire. Tons of free resources there as well. You can download our free Getting Started guide for the musical theater process and watch one of the recent masterclasses that Cynthia and I have taught on this very topic. So go get some great resources there and check out the things that we offer. We really want you to have a successful experience going through this whenever it may be for you. This year, next year, we're here for you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a screenshot and share it with a friend. If you're not on Instagram, if you don't want to tag us in your stories on Instagram, I get it. But share this episode with 3 other families or parents or friends, or if you're a student listening to this, gently nudge your parent by sending them this link in a text message. Share this episode with a friend. We would love to get the word out to more people. And consider leaving us a review. And if you're ready to take your next step as a musical theater performer, but you aren't entirely sure what that should be, then take our quiz. We'll strategize with you to outline a roadmap to your unique goals. Plus, from there, you can book a free consult with us Visit bwayvocalcoach.com/take the quiz. We can't wait to hear your story and help you take the next step in your career.